I'm 34, and I lost my husband Nathan 18 months ago in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. We had just finished dinner at our favorite Thai place. I was waiting in the car while he ran back in to grab the takeout dessert we'd forgotten. I heard the crash before I saw it. A pickup truck sped through the red light and hit him before he even reached the sidewalk. He was dead before they got him to the hospital. I had been sitting less than 20 feet away. Nathan and I had been married for 11 years. He was calm where I was anxious, funny where I was serious. He handled the grocery runs, loved fixing things himself, and always had some playlist running while he cooked. I still can't bring myself to turn the speakers on in our kitchen. We didn't have children, but we were in the middle of IVF. 2 weeks before the accident, I'd had an embryo transfer. 1 week after I buried him, I miscarried. Nobody from my family came to the hospital when it happened. Not a call, not a message. When I got home from the emergency room, exhausted and shaking, I found my mother standing in the entryway with a garbage bag full of Nathan's clothes. She said she was helping me start fresh. My father didn't say much, just looked around and said it was time I stopped wallowing. That was the beginning of what would unravel everything. I come from a family that prides itself on being strong. Not emotional, not dramatic, just functional. My parents both retired early and now fill their days playing golf and sending me passive-aggressive updates on what my brothers are up to. My older brother, Anthony, runs a real estate business, and my younger brother, Ryan, is an orthopedic nurse. They're both married, have kids, live within 10 minutes of my parents, and act like their lives are an Instagram feed. When Nathan died, they didn't even show up the night it happened. They came to the funeral, but not one of them offered to stay behind to help. No one asked if I needed groceries or help with paperwork or even company. I got flowers from Anthony's wife with a card that said, "Stay strong. You're not alone," but I haven't seen her since the service. The real blow came 2 weeks later. I was finally getting up to do laundry, hoping movement would help with the insomnia. I walked into the garage and realized Nathan's workbench was stripped. His guitar, his fishing gear, the toolbox he'd inherited from his grandfather, gone. I called my cousin Jenna because I had a suspicion, and she didn't even deny it. She said she'd swung by and figured I wouldn't mind, claimed she was helping me declutter for my healing. I told her never to come back. I changed the locks the next day. I tried to set boundaries. I told my parents I needed space. I told them it wasn't about blame or resentment. I just needed time to figure out how to exist in a world without Nathan. My mom told me I was being overdramatic. My dad said I needed to redirect my energy. They always claim that, but all their help came in the form of taking things away from me. 6 months after Nathan's death, my parents hosted a family dinner. I almost didn't go, but I hadn't seen anyone in months and felt like maybe I owed it to myself to try. That night, over salad and lasagna, Anthony asked if I had considered selling the house. Ryan made a joke about ghosts taking up space. My father asked me what my next step was in life and whether I was planning on being useful again. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't flip the table or throw my drink. I nodded, cleaned up my plate, and drove home. And that night, I quietly started putting things in motion. I stopped returning their calls. I stopped replying to group chats. I hired a lawyer to update my will, changed my emergency contacts, and started looking into remote job offers that would let me relocate. I made a list of what I wanted to keep, sell, and donate, and none of it included letting my family back into my space. By month 9, they noticed the silence. My mom showed up uninvited one afternoon and let herself into the house using the spare key she had kept for emergencies. I calmly took the key from her and walked her back to her car without saying a word. That was the last time I saw her face in person. They said my grief made me bitter. They said I was punishing people who only wanted to help. They said I was unrecognizable now, not the daughter, cousin, or sister they used to know. So I gave them what they claimed they missed. I disappeared from their lives completely. And I made sure that when they finally realized what they'd done, they'd understand exactly why I had to go. And that's where the story begins. I didn't make a big announcement when I started pulling back. No dramatic speeches, no group texts explaining my boundaries. I just stopped answering calls that weren't urgent. No more Sunday dinners, no more pretending to be okay around people who saw my grief as an inconvenience. I didn't say anything when I left the family WhatsApp group, where all the passive-aggressive advice and uninvited opinions had been thrown around like confetti. I just left quietly. No one even messaged to ask why. I found a new therapist, someone who specialized in complex grief and traumatic loss. We met virtually at first, then in person when I felt ready. She didn't rush me into forgiveness. She helped me recognize patterns, not just in my grief, but in how my family had treated me since I was a child. Always rushing things under the rug. Always uncomfortable with anything that couldn't be solved with a joke or a casserole. With her help, I started building a private life that had nothing to do with my family. Then came the financial hits. My financial advisor flagged something unusual. He told me someone claiming to be a family member had called his office asking about Nathan's estate. I only had one guess who that could be. He wouldn't give me details, just confirmed that the call had happened and that no information was shared. 2 days later, during a random phone call I hadn't screened, my mother casually asked if Nathan had left me too much money. She said it in the same tone you might use to ask about the weather. That same week, Jenna texted me a photo of her boyfriend standing next to a broken-down sedan and asked if I'd consider donating Nathan's car to help them out. She added that they were trying to build a future and that it would be a sweet way to keep his memory going. I replied with a single sentence, no. An hour later, she sent a follow-up text telling me I didn't have to be petty forever. I didn't respond. Instead of confronting her, I created a digital folder. I started taking screenshots, texts, call logs, voicemails. I even began recording voice memos of conversations when I could feel the manipulation start to creep in. It wasn't for revenge. It was for clarity. I needed proof, even just for myself, that I wasn't imagining this. My younger brother, Ryan, sent out a group text announcing his engagement. The message included the phrase, "We expect full family attendance." I didn't reply immediately. I waited a day and then RSVP'd no using the formal invitation link. I left the comments section blank. He called me 2 hours later, didn't even say hello, just launched straight into how selfish I was, how I was, letting grief turn into narcissism. Before I could get a word in, he hung up. I updated my will that weekend. I removed every family member as a beneficiary. I added my goddaughter instead, and a charity Nathan used to volunteer with. I moved the few sentimental things I had left, our wedding photo album, the letter he wrote me before my first embryo transfer, and the scarf he bought me during our honeymoon, both to a private storage unit across town. Nobody knew about it, except me and my attorney. I also took care of something I had been putting off. Nathan's guitar had sat untouched for over a year, gathering dust in the corner of our old guest room. I didn't want to give it to anyone in the family. They had turned it into a shopping list after the funeral. So I found a local music charity that runs programs for grieving children. I dropped it off without attaching my name, just a short note that it had belonged to someone who believed music could help people heal. Around that time, my neighbor Alan, who used to work with Nathan on weekend DIY projects, started stopping by again. Nothing intrusive, just little things like mowing the lawn when my mower broke, or helping me reseal the kitchen windows before the rains came. One day, after helping me lift a heavy planter box, he hesitated before telling me that my cousin Jenna had come by his house the week before. She asked him if he could keep an eye on me, make sure I wasn't doing anything reckless. That's when everything fell into place. They weren't checking in because they cared. They weren't worried I was falling apart. They were worried I'd rebuild a life that didn't include them. They were worried I might move on in a way that closed the door permanently. Not just emotionally, but financially, legally, and physically. That night, I muted Jenna's number. I didn't block her completely. I wanted to keep a record in case she slipped up again. I removed her access to my shared calendar, deleted the emergency key she still had saved under her phone contact name, and called the locksmith the next morning to redo the garage code. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess it. I just kept moving forward. Every step was quiet, calculated, and private. And they didn't notice until they realized they no longer had a key to my house, my finances, or my grief. I called my mom the morning after Alan told me about Jenna showing up at his house. I asked her directly if she'd been in touch with him or if she'd asked anyone to check on me. She paused, then said no. Her voice stayed even, but something about it felt too polished, too ready. I told her I already knew Jenna had tried to use my neighbor to keep tabs on me, and that it wasn't okay. She didn't ask how I knew. She just told me I was imagining things and that everyone was just worried. I told her I wasn't looking for a fight, just space. No calls, no surprise visits, no messages. I wanted time and distance. I kept my tone neutral, didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse anyone of anything. I ended the call calmly. 3 hours later, I got an email from my father with the subject line, "Family Intervention Plan." It was long, over 1,000 words. He said I was isolating myself, that I was refusing help, and that my grief had morphed into paranoia. He talked about guidance and course correction, like I was a misbehaving employee instead of his daughter. He copied Anthony, Ryan, and my Aunt Margaret into the email. Every line was measured, formal and distant, as if he was writing to a stranger. It ended with, "We hope you come to your senses before it's too late." That same week, Jenna posted something online, on a shared platform we all used before things fell apart. It was one of those vague quotes layered over a muted sunset background. The caption said something like, "Some people use grief as a weapon to excuse their cruelty. Don't let guilt trap you in someone else's sadness." A few of my extended relatives liked it. She didn't mention my name, but the timing was loud enough. I didn't respond. I didn't reach out to ask her to take it down. I didn't even screenshot it for the folder. I just stopped replying altogether. I didn't block anyone that week. I didn't delete contacts, but I answered nothing. Messages were left on read. Missed calls were left unreturned. I told my HR department I needed to update my file and submitted a no-contact request listing my younger brother Ryan. He had once worked at the same firm through a temp agency a few years ago, and lately he'd been messaging 2 of my coworkers trying to check in. I didn't wait for it to get messy. I submitted the documentation and had it on record. I changed my emergency contact from my parents to my college best friend, Ellie. She was the one who sat with me through the miscarriage, the one who helped me box up the nursery we never got to use. She lived 2 hours away, but when she came, she stayed. She never once called my reactions dramatic or asked me to move on. The next morning, I opened my calendar and deleted everything tied to family. My mom's 60th birthday celebration was marked in red. I removed it. I cleared the family picnic in July. I took out the group brunch planned for Ryan's fiance's bridal shower. One by one, I wiped them out. Not out of spite, but because I was finally choosing peace. The following week, my absence started to show. My mom sent 3 texts in one day. My father emailed again, this time with a shorter message. It simply read, "You are being emotionally manipulative. People are trying. You're punishing them." I responded once. Just one sentence. I wrote, "When I needed space to grieve, you gave me silence. Now I'm giving you the same." Then I archived the thread and turned off notifications for that email address. I joined a local support group for widows the same weekend. It wasn't a big group, just 6 women who met every Saturday morning at a trailhead near the park. We didn't sit in circles or cry in unison. We hiked. We shared stories. We passed water bottles and trail mix without needing to ask. One of the women, a nurse named Valerie, told me how she lost her sister in a hit and run, and how her parents had spent more time talking about funeral costs than memories. She said they told her to stop taking up space with her grief. I nodded. That line stuck. By the end of the month, I had organized the first hike myself. A longer one this time, out by the cliffs where Nathan and I had once spent a weekend on our anniversary. No one knew it meant anything to me, and I didn't say so. It wasn't about explaining. It was about reclaiming something. On the way back, one of the women told me I seemed lighter than when we first met. I didn't know how to answer that, so I just smiled. I didn't feel lighter, but I knew For the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying someone else's weight anymore. My family hadn't changed, but I had, and they were beginning to notice they didn't have access to the new version of me. Not through text, not through neighbors, not through work, not through guilt, and definitely not through Jenna. I hadn't burned any bridges, but I had closed every single door, quietly, on purpose, without a key left behind. It had been nearly 4 months of full silence when my mom showed up at my front door. She had a store-bought cherry pie in one hand and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She didn't call ahead. She didn't text. She just knocked, stood there like she belonged, and waited. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it, calm and clear. I told her I wasn't accepting visitors and that boundaries meant more than baked goods. She stood there for a moment longer, then walked away without a word. That evening, I found a handwritten note folded into my mailbox. It was on one of those floral cards she used to send with birthday checks. It said, "We all grieve. You're not special. Come back to us before you lose what's left." I held it for exactly 30 seconds before lighting a match and watching it burn in the kitchen sink. The smoke curled up like the last thread of obligation I owed them. The next day, a new number showed up on my screen, but I knew by the tone and timing, it was Jenna using a different phone. I hadn't blocked her yet, only muted. Her message read, "Heard you're throwing tantrums again. Stop telling people lies about me stealing Nathan's stuff. Everyone's tired of your drama." I didn't reply. I just pulled up her earlier messages, screenshots of her asking for Nathan's car, another asking about the guitar, and forwarded them to the family email thread. The subject line was clarification. I didn't add anything else. After it sent, I exited the thread and deleted my address from the group completely. Not even a full day later, Anthony reached out. My older brother hadn't spoken to me directly since Nathan's funeral. No check-ins, no cards, nothing. His message wasn't about reconnecting or concern. He wanted to know if I still had the key to our grandfather's cabin up north, said he was planning a weekend trip, and thought it might be time to make new memories. I didn't sugarcoat my answer. I replied, "The answer is no, nothing more." 2 days after that, my boss called me into a quick check-in meeting. She said she'd received a call from someone claiming to be my father. He had always been intrusive, but calling my employer to question my emotional stability crossed a new line, even for him. My boss had shut it down immediately and told him that was not appropriate. She documented the incident and asked if I wanted it formally reported. I said yes. I contacted my lawyer the same afternoon. We drew up a cease and desist letter, addressed to my parents and siblings. It wasn't a lawsuit, just legal documentation stating I no longer consented to any contact, direct or through third parties. It also covered interference with my workplace or social life. We sent it by certified mail with return receipts. During my next therapy session, my counselor suggested I try writing unsent letters, not to send, just to unload things. She meant one to Nathan, maybe a few more if I needed them. I ended up writing 5, one to each family member. I didn't hold back. I wrote exactly what I'd been carrying since the accident, since the miscarriage, since that dinner when they all decided I was a burden. I signed each one and locked them in the drawer under the bookshelf Nathan had built. Pull. A few days later, a mutual friend of mine and Nathan's invited me to a small concert being held in someone's backyard. It was low-key, acoustic, with fairy lights strung between trees. I decided to go. I wore the olive green jacket Nathan loved most on me. I hadn't worn it since the accident. It still smelled like his cologne, faint but there. A stranger standing near the drink table complimented it, and I smiled. I didn't tear up. I didn't have to leave early. It was the first time someone mentioned Nathan, even indirectly, and I didn't break. I posted a picture the next day, just the jacket hanging over the back of a chair with the caption, "Still fits." It wasn't public, just a quiet post on a private account with only a few dozen people. A burner account commented a few hours later, "Grief cosplay looks exhausting. Just admit you love attention." I stared at it for a second and knew it was Jenna. The tone, the timing, the wording, it matched things she'd said before. I reached out to a friend who worked in digital forensics. She owed me a favor from years back. 3 days later, my friend who worked in cybersecurity traced the comment to an email tied to Jenna's old photography business from high school. I printed the screenshot, the metadata, and the email match. I mailed it to Jenna's house in a plain envelope. No return address, no message inside, just one word on the front, receipt. I didn't hear anything back, but I didn't expect to. That wasn't the point. They were starting to realize something none of them had wanted to admit. There was no way back into my life anymore. Not through guilt, not through force, and especially not through fake pies or burner accounts. I wasn't acting out. I wasn't unraveling. I was rebuilding. Alone, by design, and stronger every week. My Aunt Margaret was the only family member I hadn't cut off entirely. She had never taken sides, never inserted herself, and never commented on how I chose to handle Nathan's death. So when she invited me to her retirement dinner, I actually thought about going. I waited a few days before replying, reading and rereading the invite. It wasn't a family event. Not officially, her colleagues would be there, some of her old students, and a few distant cousins. Still, I knew who else might show up. I finally said yes, but with conditions. I asked if I could bring someone, and she said of course. I chose Ellie, my college best friend, the one person who'd stood by me when no one else had. I also made it clear, politely but firmly, that if there was even a whisper of drama from anyone, I would leave. She understood. She even thanked me for trusting her enough to come. The venue was a nice little banquet hall, tucked behind a hotel conference center. Nothing flashy. As soon as we walked in, I saw the guest table layout, and my name was listed right beside Jenna's. I didn't cause a scene. I found my aunt's husband and quietly asked if we could be moved. He nodded and rearranged things without a word. We were seated near the back, with 2 retired teachers and an old friend of my aunt's from high school. Jenna didn't say anything, but her glare followed me all night. I stayed for the speeches. The food wasn't great, but the wine was decent. As things started winding down, people began gathering near the exit for photos and goodbyes. As I stood to leave, my father, standing nearby with a glass in his hand, raised his voice just enough for it to carry. He said, "It's good to see you acting normal again." Like my presence there was a performance. Like healing had a deadline. I didn't respond. I just turned to Ellie and told her I was ready to go. We made our way to the car, but before I could unlock the door, my mother appeared behind me. She said I was turning the whole family against each other, that I was poisoning the mood, that I was letting grief destroy what was left of our connections. I asked her without yelling, without emotion, if she had ever once thought about what it felt like to bury my husband, miscarry our child the same week, and come home to find his things taken without permission. I asked her if she had ever truly considered what it meant to be treated like an inconvenience in the middle of that. She said, "We all lost Nathan. He was part of our family too." I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. 3 days later, I got a message from my younger brother's fiancée. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She asked why I was ruining the family energy right before the wedding. I scrolled up to check if I had missed something, but there was nothing before that. No invitation. No prior message. Just that one line like a scolding. When I didn't reply, she followed up saying she wanted to clear the air in case I decided to crash the wedding. Turns out, I wasn't even invited. They just assumed I might show up and create a scene. I didn't bother answering. Instead, I booked a trip that weekend to a quiet coastal town Nathan and I used to visit every winter. There was a boardwalk we loved, cheap fried fish, a small lighthouse, and a used bookstore that still took cash only. I stayed in a tiny inn across the street from the ocean and spent 2 days walking, reading, and drinking hot tea by the window. On the second night, I took a photo of the boardwalk lights reflecting in the water. I didn't post it. I didn't caption it. I saved it in a locked folder in my photo journal. I didn't need to share it with anyone to prove I had peace. When I returned home, I saw another message from my brother's fiancée. This one was shorter. "Thanks for making the weekend about yourself." Classic. I didn't reply, but I did go online and make a donation in their name to a grief recovery foundation. I wrote, "In honor of a couple beginning their life together, may they always remember compassion for those whose lives have been changed by loss." I used their full names and home address. The foundation sent them a glossy thank you card and a printed certificate. I know they got it because one of my aunt's old coworkers posted a photo of the gift table, and there it was, front and center, next to the cake. It might have been petty, but I also think it was the most honest thank you they were ever going to get from me for showing me just how far gone they were, and for making it easier to never look back. My therapist once asked me, "What does peace look like to you now?" I didn't need time to think. I said, "Distance." That word came easier than I expected. So I made it real. I changed my phone number that same week. Not just a quick swap, I had my carrier block the old number entirely and flagged it as non-transferable. I wrote down a short list of 10 names. Close friends, my lawyer, my therapist, 2 colleagues, and Ellie. That was it. No one from my family made the list. I didn't tell them. I just disappeared from their contact list the same way they disappeared from my support system when I needed it. A few days after that, I applied to volunteer at the hospital Nathan used to work at. He wasn't a doctor, he worked in it, but he'd always tell me about the pediatric ward and how they decorated it with murals and toys. I got placed there after orientation. My job wasn't medical. I helped with crafts, reading hours, and refilling supply carts. The first week I was there, one of the nurses glanced at my name tag and asked if I was related to the family that sent those nasty emails about grief addiction. I smiled and said, "Unfortunately." 2 weeks after I changed my number, a letter showed up in my mailbox. No return address on the envelope, but I recognized the typing, my father's style. Always formal, always sterile. It wasn't handwritten. It didn't open with "Dear." It started with, "You are hurting the family legacy." It ended with, "We hope you stop sabotaging opportunities for reconciliation." Attached were printed photos from our last family vacation, smiling beach shots from 5 years ago. I stood there flipping through them like they belonged to strangers. I took the entire thing, shredded it, and mailed it back in the same envelope. No message, no explanation, just a mirror of what they had given me, silence in pieces. My aunt texted me later that week. Short message, "Your father had a mild stroke. Don't let anger make you miss your chance to forgive." I thanked her for letting me know. I told her I wouldn't be coming. She didn't argue. She didn't push. I think she understood. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. If someone breaks your ribs, you don't hug them the moment they say sorry. You protect your bones. I found a local artist who repurposed watch parts into jewelry. I gave her one of Nathan's old watches, the one that stopped working the year we got married. She turned it into a small, elegant necklace. I wore it to a community event I was invited to through the hospital. The theme was resilience through grief. They asked if I'd share a short talk about navigating loss when your support system collapses. I wrote it the night before and read it off a folded note card. After the talk, a woman approached me near the exit. She was holding a cup of tea with both hands like it was keeping her upright. She said she thought she was the only one whose grief was treated like an inconvenience. She said she hadn't seen her siblings since her partner's funeral 3 years ago. She started crying halfway through. I didn't give her advice. I just hugged her. 2 weeks later, she mailed me a thank you card. It had a bird on the front and one line inside, "You made me feel less crazy." I taped it into my journal, right under a photo of Nathan in his favorite hoodie, holding a sparkler from one of our New Year's Eves. Somehow, without expecting it, my life began filling up again, but with things I chose. Not forced apologies, not guilt-tripped reunions, real things. Well, I found out my cousin Jenna got engaged when someone tagged her in a photo from a brunch. I didn't think twice about it until I got a message from her fiancé's sister. She said Jenna had told her I was a cautionary tale in bitterness and that she hoped her future husband never got caught up in family drama like mine. I replied with one sentence, "She's right, I was bitter. And now I'm free." That was the last thing I said to anyone connected to Jenna. Every part of me that used to want validation from my family was gone. I had stopped checking for their names in my inbox. I stopped wondering if they'd change. I stopped hoping they'd understand. And I stopped letting their confusion about my grief make me question how I healed. Peace didn't come from apologies. It came from silence, the kind I chose, the kind they could invade anymore. I got a call from a private number early one morning. Normally, I would have let it ring out, but something in me answered before I even thought about it. It was my aunt. Her voice was quiet and direct. My father had passed away the night before. A stroke, the same condition he'd been recovering from when I last heard about him. She didn't try to guilt me. She just said she thought I should know. She also mentioned the family had included my name in the funeral program, that they assumed I'd be attending. I told her gently, without emotion or apology, that I wouldn't be coming. She didn't argue. She just said she'd pass the message along. That night, I pulled out the small box in the back of my bedroom closet. Inside were the letters, 5 envelopes, sealed and yellowing slightly at the edges. I had written them over a year ago, one for each person who had made me feel like my grief was a nuisance. I had thought I might burn them one day or shred them. Instead, I opened them and read each one aloud in my living room, facing no one but myself. I didn't cry for my father. I cried for the version of me who had once pleaded with him to listen, to stop minimizing, to stop dismissing everything I lost. The version of me who had begged to be treated like a human being in pain instead of a problem to manage. That woman deserved so much better than what she got. 2 days before the funeral, I received a message through my work email. It was from my younger brother's wife. She wrote, "No matter what happened, he was still your father." That was the whole message. I didn't reply. I printed it, tore it in half, and drove to the riverbank where Nathan and I used to go for picnics during springtime. It was the last place I remembered seeing him laugh so hard he spilled iced tea all over the blanket. I let the paper drift into the water and watched the pieces float until they disappeared. On the day of the funeral, I made pancakes and coffee, just like Nathan used to do every Sunday. Then I drove to a quiet spot, overlooking the hills outside town. Nathan had once told me, "If we ever get lost from each other, meet me here." I hadn't been back since he died. I brought a small tin of his ashes, ones I'd saved when I divided them between a few keepsakes, and opened the lid as the wind picked up. I didn't say anything. I just let him go, again. This time, it felt sacred, not heavy, not forced. It felt more meaningful than any scripted service full of people pretending they understood what love or loss even meant. A week after the funeral, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. It was the first message I'd received from my mother in over a year. Her voice sounded older, tired. She said, "You've made your point. Come home." I didn't hesitate. I deleted the voicemail. Then I opened my phone settings and changed my number again. Not out of fear, not out of spite. This time I did it with a kind of calm that didn't need justification. I wasn't waiting for them to catch up. I wasn't waiting for closure. I had already closed the door. That same week, I received an invitation to speak at a small conference organized by a grief recovery center. The topic was reclaiming peace after complicated loss. I accepted and prepared a simple talk, 15 minutes, no slides, just me in a room of strangers who knew what it meant to have pain dismissed. After the session ended, a woman who looked to be around my mother's age approached me. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for mine. She said, "You described what my daughter went through before she died. I wish I had heard you sooner." She cried as she spoke. I didn't know what to say, so I hugged her. That moment stayed with me more than anything else that week. Maybe I couldn't fix what happened with my own family. Maybe no version of me would have ever been good enough for them. But maybe someone else, somewhere, would hear my words and stop the pattern. Maybe a mother would listen before her daughter gave up. Maybe someone would finally feel seen. It's been almost 2 years since Nathan died. I still visit the support group. I still volunteer at the hospital. My home is filled with things that hold meaning, photos I chose to keep, plants I learned not to kill, recipes Nathan never wrote down but that I remember by instinct. The necklace made from his old watch still sits on my dresser. I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since the funeral. Not one word. No updates. No fake holiday texts. Nothing. And in that silence, I found something better than approval. They said my grief made me bitter. They were wrong. It made me clear. And now, they miss me. Because I finally stopped letting them unmake me.